This is a 15-minute power summary of Discovery of the Presence of God, Devotional Nonduality, written by Dr. David Hawkins in 2006. Chapter 1 sets the stage by introducing devotional nonduality as the bedrock principle upon which the entire structure of spiritual evolution is built. Hawkins emphasizes the centrality of devotion, not as a fleeting emotion or a passive feeling, but as a radical shift in one's entire way of being. It is a complete reorientation of one's life, a dedication to aligning every. He clarifies that authentic devotion transcends the realm of mere sentimentality. It necessitates actively and consciously surrendering the ego's relentless pursuit of self-serving desires. It involves a conscious and consistent alignment with the inherent qualities of divinity: truth, love, compassion, wisdom, and non-partiality. This alignment transforms the mundane into the sacred. The simplest actions, like preparing a meal or tending a garden, become infused with a sense of offering, a recognition of the divine presence within all things. Every act becomes an act of worship, a moment of connection with the source. Hawkins meticulously deconstructs the limitations of how the ego mind perceives divinity. He explains how our ingrained tendency to anthropomorphize God, to project human-like emotions, limitations, and biases onto the divine, creates a distorted and limiting understanding that hinders our spiritual progress. This anthropomorphic view can lead to a belief in a wrathful, vengeful God, a deity driven by jealousy and favoritism, or a being who demands appeasement and blind obedience. These distorted conceptions, Hawkins argues, stem from the ego's deep-seated need to control, define, and categorize. This need stems from fear, the fear of the unknown, the fear of losing control, and the fear of annihilation. The ego seeks to impose its own limited framework onto the vast and boundless reality of the divine, creating a cage of beliefs and perceptions that ultimately prevents us from experiencing the true nature of God. Hawkins contrasts this limited view with the liberating concept of non-duality. Non-duality, as the term suggests, dissolves the artificial boundaries and separations inherent in dualistic thinking. It recognizes divinity as an all-encompassing, omnipresent reality, existing beyond the confines of human conceptualization and the limitations of language. It is a reality that can only be experienced directly through the silencing of the mind and the surrender of the ego's relentless chatter. He encourages us to relinquish the illusion of knowing about God, and instead embrace a state of humble not knowing. This involves letting go of our preconceived notions, doctrinal beliefs, and rigid interpretations of Scripture. True understanding, he explains, arises not through intellectual accumulation or theological debate, but through a deep inner surrender, an openness to the divine that allows the truth to reveal itself organically. Chapter 2. The Inner Path, a journey of direct experience and self-realization. Chapter 2 further explores the distinction between the inner path of non-duality and the path of traditional religious observance. Hawkins acknowledges the universality of faith, recognizing that all humans, consciously or unconsciously, place their faith in something, be it material possessions, relationships, ideologies, or a higher power. The key lies in discerning where our faith is directed and what it ultimately serves. Is it serving the ego's need for security and control, or is it guiding us toward the liberation and fulfillment of the self? Hawkins traces the evolution of religious and philosophical thought, exploring the emergence of the world's great religions and their profound impact on civilizations. He recognizes the core spiritual truths that lie at the heart of each tradition: love and forgiveness in Christianity, compassion in Buddhism, living by sacred law in Judaism, and surrender to the divine will in Islam. These truths, he argues, point toward a common thread, a universal longing for connection with the divine that transcends cultural and doctrinal differences. However, Hawkins also highlights the potential pitfalls of clinging too tightly to external forms and doctrines. While traditional religions often serve as a valuable starting point on the spiritual journey, they can become entangled with dogma, ritual, and hierarchical structures that ultimately obscure the direct experience of truth. The emphasis on external authority, scriptural interpretation, and specific beliefs can create barriers to the inner realization of the self. In contrast, the inner path of non-duality emphasizes a more personal and experiential approach to spiritual growth. It encourages introspection, self-inquiry, and the direct experience of divinity as immanent, present within us. Rather than solely transcendent and distant, it invites us to look within, to explore the depths of our own being, and to discover the divine presence that resides at the core of our existence. This path is not about withdrawing from the world or abandoning our responsibilities. It is about approaching life with a new perspective, a deeper understanding, and a heart filled with compassion and love. It is about recognizing the interconnectedness of all things and realizing our unity with the divine. Chapter 3. Orientation, cultivating the right mindset for the journey with. Chapter 3 acts as a practical guide for navigating the inner path, offering specific instructions on cultivating the right mindset and orientation for spiritual growth. Hawkins stresses the paramount importance of shifting from a mode of acquiring knowledge to a mode of letting go. This involves surrendering control, embracing uncertainty, and trusting in the natural unfolding of the self. He compares this shift to floating effortlessly in water, allowing the current to carry us instead of struggling against it. Force and effort, he explains, are the tools of the ego, while surrender and trust are qualities of the. The chapter explores the transformative power of positive attitudes, humility, kindness, compassion, and respect for all life. These attitudes, when practiced consistently, become potent tools for spiritual evolution. They weaken the ego's defenses, dissolve the barriers of separation, and allow for the emergence of the. Hawkins delves into the distinction between ego-driven willpower, which often leads to struggle, frustration, and burnout, and surrendering to the spiritual will, a force that aligns with divine wisdom and effortlessly guides us toward our highest. He encourages seekers to relinquish the need to control and manipulate, allowing the divine to work through them as instruments of love, compassion, and healing. The chapter further highlights the importance of shifting our focus from the ego's narrow and fragmented perception of reality to the spirit's expansive awareness of the interconnectedness of all things. This shift allows us to see beyond the limitations of our individual perspective and experience the world with greater clarity, compassion, and understanding. Chapter 4. Spiritual Practices, Tools for Awakening and Transfer. Chapter 4 explores the vast and diverse array of spiritual practices found across cultures and religions. Hawkins acknowledges the multitude of paths available to seekers, each offering unique tools and techniques to facilitate the process of awakening and transformation. He encourages us to explore different practices, to experiment with what resonates with us, and to discover the methods that best support our individual journey. He examines practices such as prayer, worship, meditation, yoga, chanting, and various rituals, recognizing their potential value as aids on the spiritual path. However, Hawkins cautions against becoming attached to specific forms or texts. He emphasizes that true effectiveness lies not in the outward expression, but in the inner intention and alignment with truth. The form is simply a vehicle, a means to an end. The true power lies in the sincerity, dedication, and intention with which we engage in these practices. Hawkins delves deeper into the concept of divinity as both transcendent and immanent, present within all of creation. He discusses the natural law doctrine, which affirms humanity's innate capacity to recognize God as creator, highlighting its universality across cultures and belief systems. This doctrine, he explains, points towards the inherent knowingness within each of us, a deep inner connection to the divine source that awaits our awakening. The chapter then offers a detailed exploration of meditation, examining various techniques and traditions, including those from Hinduism, Buddhism, Sufism, and Christian mysticism. He emphasizes the importance of transcending identification with the body and mind during meditation. This involves letting go of thoughts, sensations, and emotions, allowing them to arise and pass without clinging or resistance, and resting in the silent, still, and ever-present awareness that is the self. Hawkins distinguishes between genuine mystical states, characterized by peace, love, unity, and an unshakable sense of connection with the divine, and artificially induced altered states of consciousness. He cautions against practices that rely on rhythmic repetition, external stimuli, or the manipulation of energies to create a temporary sense of transcendence. While these experiences can be compelling, they are ultimately transient and due. True enlightenment, he emphasizes, is a permanent shift in consciousness, marked by the dissolution of the ego and the unwavering awareness of the self. Clarifications, discernment, transformation, and avoiding spiritual pitfalls. Chapter 5 emphasizes the crucial need for discernment on the spiritual path. In a world overflowing with information, teachings, and practices claiming to lead to enlightenment, it becomes imperative to develop the capacity to distinguish authentic spiritual guidance from misleading or erroneous information. Hawkins provides seekers with practical tools and insights to navigate this complex landscape with clarity and wisdom. He encourages seekers to utilize various methods of discernment, including historical records, evaluating the impact of teachings on the world, and the powerful technique of consciousness calibration. This latter method, developed by Hawkins himself, allows for an objective assessment of the level of truth in teachings and practices. It offers a valuable resource for distinguishing genuine spiritual wisdom from misleading or even harmful information. Hawkins specifically cautions against the allure of the astral circus, the realm of paranormal phenomena, supernatural entities, and esoteric practices often mistaken for genuine spiritual enlightenment. He explains that while these realms may seem intriguing or even compelling, they are ultimately distractions that can hinder true spiritual progress. The pursuit of psychic powers, communication with spirits, or manipulation of energies, he argues, reinforces the ego's need for control and specialness, ultimately preventing the realization of the self. The chapter also addresses the common pitfall of mixing levels of truth and abstraction. Hawkins explains that different levels of consciousness have their own corresponding realities, and that attempting to apply truths from a higher level to a lower level can lead to confusion, misinterpretation, and even harmful consequences. He emphasizes the importance of honoring one's current level of development, progressing gradually along the path, and avoiding premature attempts to grasp concepts beyond one's current capacity. Hawkins underscores the transformative power of true spiritual understanding. It is not simply a matter of intellectual accumulation or adopting new beliefs. It is a process of deep inner transformation that involves letting go of limiting beliefs, surrendering control, and aligning oneself with the inherent qualities of the divine: truth, love, compassion, wisdom, and non-partiality. This transformation, he explains, is reflected in every aspect of one's being: thoughts, feelings, actions, and relationships. Per se, the experiencer dismantling the illusion of the separate self. Chapter 6 delves into the nature of the experiencer, the processing function of the ego mind that constantly seeks pleasure and avoids pain, clinging to desires and fearing loss. This function, while essential for survival in the physical world, becomes a significant obstacle on the spiritual path as it reinforces the illusion of a separate self, a self distinct and separate from the divine. Hawkins traces the evolutionary origins of the experiencer, explaining how it developed from the primal need for survival in physically separate units. This need to acquire resources, control one's environment, and distinguish between friend and foe gave rise to a complex processing function that became increasingly sophisticated over time. This function, designed to ensure survival, ultimately created the illusion of a separate self, a self defined by its desires, fears, and attachments. He explains how the influx of spiritual energy, known as Kundalini, can facilitate the transcendence of the experiencer. This transformative energy activates higher spiritual centers, allowing for a shift from egocentricity to a more expansive awareness of reality. The chapter includes a chart illustrating the physiological changes in the brain associated with spiritual evolution. These changes highlight the shift from stress, fear, and negativity to peace, joy, and well-being as one progresses on the. Hawkins emphasizes that the experiencer, while seemingly powerful, is not the true self. It is merely a function, a tool of consciousness that has been mistaken for the source of identity. He encourages seekers to recognize the experiencer's limitations and to surrender its constant demands for pleasure and control. Chapter 7. The Razor's Edge, the Delicate Balance of Present Moment Awareness. Chapter 7 delves into the concept of staying on the crest of the wave, maintaining a delicate balance of present moment awareness without clinging to the past or grasping for the future. Hawkins likens this to walking on a razor's edge, requiring constant vigilance and a willingness to surrender the ego's desire to control or manipulate experience. He explains that the experiencer, driven by its need for gratification, is constantly seeking to extract pleasure or avoid pain from every moment. It either dwells in the past, replaying memories and regrets, or it projects into the future, anticipating and planning, fueled by fear and desire. To transcend this tendency, one must learn to rest in the present moment, free from the pull of past and future. Hawkins emphasizes the practice of surrendering thoughts and feelings as they arise, refusing to engage with their content and instead focusing on the silent field of awareness from which they emerge. This practice, he explains, allows the mind to become still and reveals the underlying reality of the self, a reality that transcends the limitations of thought. He compares the practice of present moment awareness to the skill of a surfer riding a wave. The surfer doesn't fight against the wave or try to control its movement. Instead, they surrender to its power, finding balance and harmony. Similarly, the spiritual seeker learns to ride the waves of thoughts, feelings, and sensations without getting swept away by them. Chapter 8. Allness versus nothingness. Transcending the duality and embracing the. This chapter addresses a crucial turning point on the spiritual path, the confrontation with the concept of nothingness. Hawkins clarifies the distinction between the void, a state of emptiness and absence often mistaken for enlightenment, and the true nature of reality as allness, a boundless, all-encompassing field of consciousness that is characterized by infinite love and the radiant essence of creation. He shares his personal experience of encountering the void during intense meditation, initially mistaking its stillness and absence of thought for the ultimate realization. However, upon recognizing the lack of the profound love he had previously experienced, he understood the limitations of the void. He realized that love is the defining characteristic of divinity, the essence that imbues all of creation with meaning and purpose. The chapter emphasizes the importance of moving beyond the duality of existence and non-existence, allness and nothingness. These are concepts of the mind, constructs that create artificial boundaries and limitations. Hawkins encourages seekers to embrace the affirmative path, recognizing the inherent perfection and beauty of all creation as an expression of divine love. He reminds us that the fear of non-existence is ultimately an illusion of the ego, a phantom that dissolves when we surrender to the boundless reality of the self. Hawkins invites us to see the world through the lens of love, recognizing the inherent sacredness and interconnectedness of all things. He explains that when we transcend the duality of the ego, we experience the world as a unified whole, a symphony of creation orchestrated by the divine. Dialogues unveiling deeper meanings through inquiry and revelation. Chapter 9 takes on a dynamic, interactive format, utilizing a dialogue structure to explore the subtle nuances of the concepts presented in previous chapters. This approach allows for a more engaging and accessible exploration of complex spiritual truths, addressing common questions and challenges faced by seekers on the. The chapter begins by examining the purpose of spiritual writing and teaching. Hawkins emphasizes the importance of conveying clear, verifiable information that is practically useful for those seeking to deepen their spiritual understanding and embark on the path of transformation. He acknowledges the limitations of traditional spiritual texts, often obscured by archaic language, cultural context, and interpretations entangled with dogma and belief systems. He stresses the need for modern explanations and clarifications that resonate with contemporary seekers, using language that is clear, concise, and directly applicable to everyday life. The goal, he explains, is to bridge the gap between intellectual understanding and experiential realization, allowing spiritual truths to penetrate the heart and transform the being. The dialogue then addresses the crucial question of who or what is the source of spiritual teachings. Hawkins clarifies that the true teacher is not an external authority figure, but the self within, the presence of divinity that transcends individual personality and speaks through the mind He uses the analogy of a cat being asked to define itself. The cat, he explains, would not identify with the label cat, but with its own inherent existence, its own direct experience of being. Similarly, the true self is not defined by thoughts, beliefs, or labels, but by its own innate awareness and presence. Hawkins further explores the distinction between experiencing, which is a function of the ego mind, and awareness, which is a quality of consciousness itself. He explains that at lower levels of consciousness, beings primarily experience life through the lens of their desires, fears, and attachments, lacking the awareness of their own true nature. As consciousness evolves, awareness emerges alongside the realization of the intrinsic value and significance of being. This awareness transcends the limitations of the ego and allows for a direct experience of the interconnectedness of all and the world, finding meaning and purpose amidst the flow of life. This chapter delves into the complex relationship between spirituality and the world, offering guidance on navigating the challenges and opportunities presented by everyday life. Hawkins emphasizes that while inner spiritual work is crucial for transformation, it does not necessitate withdrawing from the world entirely. Instead, he encourages seekers to recontextualize their worldly experiences, seeing them as opportunities for growth, learning, and the application of spiritual principles. He explores the concepts of asceticism and renunciation, traditionally associated with physical withdrawal from worldly pleasures and attachment, while recognizing the value of these practices for certain individuals at certain stages of their journey. Hawkins clarifies that true renunciation is ultimately an internal process. It involves letting go of ego-driven desires, attachments, and the need for control, rather than necessarily abandoning all worldly possessions or relations. He addresses the challenging question of how to respond to world events and suffering, emphasizing the importance of compassion and understanding rather than judgment and blame. Hawkins encourages readers to view the world as a school for enlightenment, offering valuable lessons and opportunities for karmic growth. He stresses that focusing on personal spiritual evolution, rather than getting caught in the drama and turmoil of external events, is the most effective way to contribute positively to life. Hawkins reminds us that the world is a reflection of our collective consciousness. As we individually awaken to our true nature, we contribute to a shift in collective consciousness, creating a ripple effect that influences the world around. Teachers and teachings, discerning authenticity in a world of information. Chapter 11 provides a comprehensive guide for discerning the authenticity of spiritual teachers and teachings, offering valuable criteria to avoid deception and misleading information. In a world saturated with spiritual teachings, books, workshops, and gurus, it becomes increasingly important to cultivate the discernment necessary to distinguish the true from the false. Hawkins lists numerous characteristics of genuine spiritual truth and integrous teachers, emphasizing qualities such as universality, non-exclusivity, integrity, and freedom from control or manipulation. Authentic teachings, he explains, are timeless, relevant across cultures, accessible to all, and do not seek to control or exploit their followers. He includes extensive lists of calibrated levels for well-known spiritual teachers, scriptures, and writings, providing readers with a valuable tool for assessing their level of truth and alignment with higher consciousness. This information empowers seekers to make informed choices about the paths they choose to follow and the teachers they choose to learn from. Hawkins cautions against the pitfalls of the spiritual ego, which can manifest as feelings of superiority, specialness, or a desire for recognition. He emphasizes the importance of humility and gratitude on the spiritual path, acknowledging the limitations of the ego and recognizing the divine source of all true knowledge and wisdom. Chapter 12. The devotee embarking on the transformative journey of the soul. This chapter explores the diverse paths that lead individuals to become spiritual devotees, highlighting the various motivations and experiences that spark a commitment to spiritual growth. Hawkins recognizes the unique trajectory of each seeker's journey, acknowledging the role of upbringing, cultural influences, life events, and personal experiences in shaping their path. He describes the characteristics of the spiritual aspirant, emphasizing qualities such as introspection, curiosity, a yearning for deeper meaning and purpose in life, and a longing for connection with something greater than themselves. The chapter outlines the stages of the spiritual journey, from initial exploration and experimentation with different practices to a deepening commitment, increasing surrender, and the eventual realization of the self. Hawkins emphasizes the importance of aligning with a valid spiritual pathway, encouraging seekers to carefully evaluate teachings and teachers based on the criteria outlined in Chapter 11. He assures readers that the journey of the devotee, while challenging at times, is ultimately one of transformation and fulfillment. It leads to greater happiness, inner peace, a profound sense of purpose, and a deep, abiding connection with the divine. Transcending identification with the ego shade, unveiling the illusion and embracing true identity. Chapter 13 delves into the core of spiritual endeavor, the dismantling of the ego and the recognition of our true identity as the self, the eternal, unchanging presence of divinity within. Hawkins explains that the ego, born out of the need for survival in the physical world, creates an illusory sense of self, a separate identity defined by desires, fears, and attachments. It mistakenly identifies with the functions and qualities of the mind, claiming ownership over thoughts, feelings, and experiences as mine, thus solidifying the illusion of a separate self. He meticulously unravels the evolutionary origins of the ego, tracing its development from the basic need for survival in physically separate units. This need to acquire resources, protect oneself, and navigate a world of duality led to the creation of a complex processing function that became increasingly sophisticated over time. This function, while essential for survival, ultimately created the illusion of separation, a sense of self as distinct and independent from the divine source. Hawkins emphasizes the importance of understanding the ego's structure and function to effectively dismantle it. He encourages seekers to engage in rigorous self-inquiry, a process of honest and unflinching introspection that involves investigating their thoughts, feelings, and motivations to uncover the ego's hidden agendas. He encourages us to examine our desires, our fears, our attachments, and our beliefs, to see how they shape our perceptions and experiences, and to recognize the ways in which the ego perpetuates the illusion of separation. This process of self-inquiry, often described as renunciation, involves letting go of the ego's relentless pursuit of pleasure, control, and recognition in the world. It is about surrendering the need to define oneself through external achievements, possessions, or relationships, and instead recognizing the intrinsic wholeness and fulfillment that resides within the self. Hawkins addresses the common fear that arises when confronting the prospect of letting go of the ego, the fear of losing oneself, of becoming nothing. He assures seekers that this fear is an illusion, a trick of the ego designed to maintain the true self, he explains, is not something that can be lost or gained. It is the ever-present reality of our being, the ground of our existence, awaiting the presence of self stepping into the radiant light of truth. This chapter explores the nature of enlightenment, the ultimate goal of spiritual endeavor. Hawkins emphasizes that enlightenment is not an achievement, a reward for good behavior, or a state to be attained through effort. It is a shift in consciousness, a radical transformation of perception where the illusory self dissolves in the true self. The presence of divinity within us shines forth in its full radiance. He guides us through the stages leading up to enlightenment, including the transcendence of the void, a state of emptiness and absence that can be mistaken for the ultimate reality. The void, he explains, is a seductive trap for the seeker as it offers a temporary sense of peace and stillness. However, it lacks the essential quality of love, the defining characteristic of the divine. Hawkins describes the final doorway to enlightenment, where the seeker is confronted with the most profound fear, the fear of absolute death, of annihilation. This fear, he explains, arises from the ego's mistaken identification with the physical body and the limited sense of self. To pass through this doorway, one must surrender the very notion of existence as a separate self, relinquishing the last vestiges of the ego's hold on consciousness. He then describes the awe-inspiring transformation that occurs when this final surrender takes place. The mind falls silent, the ego dissolves, and the seeker is enveloped in the radiant, luminous presence of the self. Time and space cease to exist, and the world, now perceived with clarity and wonder, shines forth as a manifestation of the divine. All separation dissolves, and the seeker realizes their unity with all of creation, experiencing the boundless love, peace, and perfection that is the essence of the self. Progressive states of consciousness. The unfolding of the divine within. The final chapter addresses the transitions and challenges that seekers encounter as they progress along the path of spiritual evolution. Hawkins emphasizes the importance of patience, faith, and surrender in navigating the often. He assures us that these experiences, while sometimes difficult or disorienting, are temporary and ultimately serve to propel us towards greater clarity, understanding. He explores the persistent nature of the experiencer, the ego's processing function that constantly seeks to derive pleasure or avoid pain from every experience. He encourages seekers to recognize the experiencer's limitations, to observe its relentless chatter without getting caught in its web, and to shift their focus to the silent field of awareness, the space from which all thoughts, feelings. Hawkins delves into the concept of renunciation, emphasizing that true renunciation is not about physical withdrawal from the world, but an internal letting go of attachments, desires, and the need for control. As one progresses on the path, the world becomes less compelling, the ego's demands for gratification diminish, and a deep appreciation for the inherent joy and fulfillment of the self emerges. He encourages seekers to approach life with a sense of wonder and gratitude, recognizing the sacredness and interconnectedness of all things. The world, he explains, becomes a mirror reflecting the divine, a canvas upon which the beauty and perfection of creation is displayed. The core principles of discovery of the presence of God. Discovery of the presence of God offers a profound and transformative guide to spiritual awakening, meticulously detailing the path of devotional non-duality. The book distills the essence of spiritual wisdom into a practical and accessible framework, empowering seekers to embark on their own journey towards enlightenment. Here are the core teachings and concepts that form the foundation of this book. Divinity as both transcendent and immanent. The book emphasizes that God is not solely a distant, external force residing in a separate realm, but is also the very essence of all creation, present within each and every being. This understanding allows us to shift from a limited anthropomorphic view of God to a realization of the divine as the ground of our being, the source of our existence, and the unifying force that connects all things. The nature of consciousness. Hawkins explores the nature of consciousness, revealing it as an infinite, all-encompassing field that is the foundation of all reality. Human consciousness, he explains, is an expression of this boundless field, capable of evolving from basic survival instincts to higher levels of awareness, love, and unity with the divine. 3. The role of the ego. The book delves into the role of the ego, explaining its function as a survival mechanism that creates a sense of separate identity. The ego, rooted in fear and desire, seeks control, clings to attachments, and perpetuates the illusion of separation from the divine. 4. The path of spiritual evolution. Hawkins illuminates the path of spiritual evolution, emphasizing the importance of surrender, humility, and letting go of the ego's illusions. He highlights the transformative power of aligning with spiritual truth, cultivating positive attitudes such as love, compassion, and forgiveness, and engaging in authentic spiritual practices like meditation and self-inquiry. 5. The realization of the self. The book culminates in the realization of the self, the ultimate goal of spiritual endeavor. This realization, Hawkins explains, is not an achievement or acquisition, but a profound shift in consciousness where the ego dissolves and the true self, the presence of divinity within us, shines forth. This realization is characterized by boundless love, peace, joy, and the understanding that all is perfect and complete.